The other day on social media, I suggested a potential trade between the Lakers for Michael Malone. Why did I say that? Plus, we'll talk about the unknowns for next season and why I think Denver needs a new championship DNA. All that and more on Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us, making us your first listen, and being with us Monday through Friday, being an everydayer. Appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Always grateful for everyone being a part of this community. My name is Matt Moore. I'm a senior NBA writer for the Action Network, coming to you from Dallas, Texas. I'm in a hotel room in Dallas, Texas for games 3 and 4 of the NBA Finals between the Mavs and the Celtics. Swipe, I got caught up with some stuff, so I'm filling in because I don't have kids to wrangle. So I'm going to do the show today and have some thoughts I want to get off my chest anyway. So it worked out pretty well. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Okay. Let's start here. The other day on social media, I kind of referenced that Calvin Booth, or that the Lakers should call up Calvin Booth and see if there would be a possibility of a trade for Michael Malone. Now, I want to start right here. That's not how these things work. Okay. You don't just trade up a team and are like, hey, we'll trade for your coach. And they're like, great, we'll send it to you. That's no. You get a new agreement because one, like coaches, you can trade compensation for the rights to a coach, but you can't trade for that contract, right? So the conversation would instead be just hypothetically, okay, would be that the Lakers approach Michael Malone and were like, hey, do you have any interest in leaving Denver and coaching us if we paid you X millions of dollars? Then if there was interest, Malone would be like, I'm under contract. You'd have to see. And then they would be like, hey, Calvin, if would you be at all open to those kind of possibilities? It'd be a very delicate conversation. Why would I bring this up? Like, why would I mention this? Okay. Do I think this is going to happen? No, it's not going to happen. That's not zero. There's a less than 2% chance it happens. It's like, that's it. In 2% of all multiverses, does Michael Malone become the coach of the Los Angeles Lakers? The reason I'm kind of bringing this up, it's not that I've heard that things are so bad between Malone and Booth. It's not that I think that things are irreparable. It's not that I think that there is no other way this ends. What I am going to say is, here's what we have. Okay. We have a known disconnect that they have acknowledged between the front office that wants to develop players long-term and really believes in its ability to identify talent worth developing, and Michael Malone, who's like, I have to have guys I can play if you want to win a championship. And that dichotomy, that tension is real. It's been reported. It's been apparent. This isn't a secret. They acknowledged it to a certain degree at the ending season presser. Okay. Now that doesn't mean that they can't work together. But it doesn't mean they can't work together at all. Okay. They can do that. They can definitely get past this. Things are very rarely as bad as we kind of as we kind of in the media, especially make things out to be. It's usually not that bad. Like they don't get along. It gets made into they hate each other. There's some tension there. It's a toxic environment. Like we just exaggerate things. And the reason, honestly, that we exaggerate things is the people that often will tell us things are people that will exaggerate things themselves, whether they're for whatever reason. Okay. I do think that Calvin Booth took over a team coached by Michael Malone when Michael Malone was hired by Tim Connelly. It's not his guy. And every GM in this sport always wants their guy. There are very few exceptions of a new front office coming in and embracing the current coach and not wanting a different guy, because everyone's got different things that they prioritize. And the reality here is that Calvin Booth and Tim Connelly are not very much alike. They just have different views on basketball. They just have different views on the politics of the NBA. They have a different view on how they approach things. So that to me is like relevant here, where Michael Malone just simply may not be Booth's guys. And that's kind of it. Jeremy Martin asks, why didn't Malone play the rookies in the playoffs? They're not very good. That's the end point there, is they're not good enough to play. You can say that they could have gotten there if you played them in the regular season, and maybe they would have developed into amazing players that could have turned the series around and won Denver a championship. I find that to be preposterous, but I also understand that I know how you can get there. Like, I personally can't get there, but I understand how you can get there. But that's why Malone didn't play the rookies in the playoffs. I want to comment on this. So Astrid's in here and he says, is it possible that a new direction is needed at head coach? It's gotten very predictable. I think that there are changes that have to happen with the coaching staff. I think they need to reinvent the offense a little bit. I think they need to get out of their comfort zone a little bit. However, one thing I will say is that all of the conversation, what I will challenge you as Nuggets fans to think about, whether it's an online discourse, chatting with your friends, or just like listen to the show and how you think about things as you shape your opinions, think about this. Don't look for confirmation bias, because it happens so often. And honestly, like, I'm as much a victim of it as anybody, where like I have real questions about Christian Braun's offensive ability. So when Christian Braun has a terrible drive that leads to nowhere, I turn to Ryan Blackburn and I'm like, see? And then like I ignore the times when he's got like a great play or hits a three or whatever. But we see this a lot with Malone, where people are just like, nobody likes their coach. Warriors fans want Steve Kerr fired. I genuinely have seen Spurs fans that are tired of Pop. And they were tired of him like 2017 when they were still in contention, like criticizing him. So nobody's happy with coaches. But just be careful that if you're like annoyed by Malone, you need to understand that that's probably that you're going to be annoyed by whatever coach is there. And you might be swapping out one problem for another. But this isn't going to fix things for the Nuggets. Now, back to the idea of trading for the Lakers. One, if Malone were interested in it, I don't think it's now. I think he wants to keep trying to win championships with Nikola, and that's why this is a 2% chance, right? I think he wants to try and win championships, and he loves Denver. Like, Malone loves Denver. That matters. That should matter. It should matter more to people than it does. Like, Malone genuinely has come to love the community. He and his wife are part of the community. One of his girls is still in school, and so he's going to want to stay for that as well. Coaches don't like moving when their kids are in high school. It's not comfortable. That said, the Lakers' opportunity would be pretty ideal. For all of the talk about the tension between, the back and forth between Malone and LeBron, LeBron was coached by Malone. They've known each other forever. Like, they've been in the league almost the same amount of time. And Malone said very positive things about him before, repeatedly. And I just don't believe that the spat that they had last year was anything meaningful in the long-term relationship between the two. And Malone would give them the answer to everything that the Lakers are looking for: a coach that can build a culture, a coach that can develop guys, and a guy that can win championships now. So, like, as much as you're like, develop players, what are you talking about? Yes, guys, like, he was around from 2016 to 2019, developing Nikola Jokic, Gary Harris, Jamal Murray, Will Barton, Michael Porter Jr., all of these guys. Like, sorry, that's just like a fact that he has developed a lot of really good players. To that end, he's a really great fit for the Lakers and would be a perfect thing. Now, again, I don't think that Malone wants that right now. I think he wants to win championships. And the Lakers are likely to get this job filled. The reason I kind of brought it up was just from the idea of I wanted to basically let it be known that unless there is a lot of work done between Malone and Booth, eventually that relationship will come to an end. Now, that's not normal, or that's not abnormal, rather. It's not like a big deal. Coaches get fired, GMs move on, coaches move on. That's life in the NBA. Malone knows it. He's had longer here than most coaches ever would. Like, he's had, for a guy that was always worried about getting fired, Malone's been here over a decade. Or not over a decade, but he's been here 9 years, right? This will be his 10th year. That, to me, is relevant in terms of the future. That you just should keep in mind that, like, the fairy tale scenario that I think everyone really kind of thought after last year's championship is probably just not going to come true. They're probably not going to win 3 to 4 championships with the same core, with the same players, with the same coach. There's going to be changes. And we could be kind of like honest with that as we kind of move forward. On the other side, I want to talk about the unknown unknowns going into next season and how that actually gives some optimism for next season for Denver. I'll talk about that up next here on Locked On Nuggets. Summertime means baseball, the NBA Finals, and more, and you can bet it all on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet everything from Finals MVP, Jaylen Brown, to who's going to hit one out of the park. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. I'm checking out the comments here as we get back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you guys being part of our day. Josh says they did, and Malone agreed he ran the starters into the ground. If he plays the youth, settles for a lower seed, youth develops, and starters get rest, and we finish Game 7 up 20. Yeah, all that's true. I think the balance here is that I will say, so the Mavericks could win the title, especially with this Kristaps Porzingis injury. They would be the worst team in NBA history by simple rating system to ever win the title. Now, it doesn't mean that they're like the worst team. That's just like a stat. The history says that if you're past the 3rd seed, you don't win the title. No 5th seed has won it, by the way. 4 seeds have won it. 6 seeds have won it. No 5th seed is maybe the first 5 seed to ever win it. History says you don't win it if you're that low. So I will say that like you do have to balance this. You can't just be like, well, we're gonna play the young guys and rest the starters and get a 6 seed. Don't buy into the fact that the Heat and the Mavericks, both the seeds lower, have made a run. There's probably something to that, but it's still a very risky and dangerous proposition. Like the Mavs could have easily lost to the Thunder, and if Denver doesn't lose Game 7 up 20, if they don't blow a 20-point lead in Game 7, I think that Denver beats Dallas in 5. So. I would not overreact to that kind of idea. You have to still balance those kind of concepts. Alexa says we want a low-hanging championship in a radically different landscape, and then the evolved league we see now. I don't agree. I don't agree at all. Most things are actually pretty stagnant, Alexis. Like there's not a lot that's changed here. We don't have like these super teams. Denver was still the 2 seed. Like this isn't radically different. Thunder with a very young squad and great injury luck was number 1. Okay. Boston was the 1 seed last year. They were the 1 seed this year. There's nothing like radically different about the league. So I don't, there's actually really no reason to think that like the Nuggets are not like light years beyond contention. That's just not the case. Tommy says, Matt Surley, Denver will have to go in while they have Joker. That's actually the opposite of what I am. Like I'm pretty consistently like, no, like you have a very short window. Try and win as many championships as you can because you can't bank on this long-term thing. Like you just can't trust it. You should do everything you can to win championships. It's very hard. So that's kind of the opposite of what I think. Alexis says Mavs aren't an ordinary 5th seed after their trades. I disagree. And I think we're seeing that in the finals so far. They had a really good matchup. Like there's absolutely no reason to look at the Mavs and look at them and be like, they're an elite team. There's no reason to think that. You can, other than just be like, well, they're in the finals. Okay. But we're doing the results first thing, okay, but that's not an accurate element. So let's talk about this. I want to talk about unknown unknowns. There will be something next year. Like there are always kind of plot twists, I think, that happen. And I talked about this a lot. It's one of the reasons why I said pretty repeatedly on other shows that I didn't think we were going to see Celtics Nuggets because there's always these plot twists that happen. And for the Nuggets, unfortunately, it was a bad plot twist where Jamal got hurt. And things look pretty bleak right now for Denver, honestly, because I continue to think KCP is going to be gone. And I don't like the replacement options. And they're very limited in what they can do in terms of adding talent. However, there are always unknown unknowns. And that's a phrase taken from a terrible human being in a documentary. And you should look up the phrase. If we look at the possibilities here, a big one for me starts with Peyton Watson, who I was like a little bit skeptical on and didn't like the overhype of him early. Peyton showed me so much this season. He added to his on-ball game. Like, he's a guy that actually has shake offensively. It's one of the things that's the difference between him and Christian for me, where Christian shot well and for 3 months after the All-Star break, which is cool. And maybe he's able to find his rhythm over the summer and he turns into a 37 to 40% shooter this season, which would be huge for Denver. But Peyton looks like a 3-level scorer who can also pass. And he's going to have another year of strength development. And he's going to have another year of seasoning. And he's going to have another year of off-season work. Like, it would not surprise me if Peyton was the one that made the leap next year, not Christian, and you actually could wind up playing Peyton at 2 guard. I don't hate the idea of that either. Julian Strother actually had some good moments early in the season and then got hurt and never really recovered. And what if Julian has a great summer league and comes in and really kills it and just steps up his game as the game slows down for him, is able to make more reads, and he becomes more of a pro. Jalen Pickett's an unknown. He's a known unknown. Like, we don't know. We just don't know about him. And that's been the frustration from the DNVR guys, is that we have no idea to be able to know whether Jalen's good or not. So that's a possibility. The Nuggets can add somebody in the draft. I view this draft as a real opportunity, and it's a terrible draft. Don't get me wrong. I would hate to have your future hanging on this draft. That's a bummer if that's the case. But there are always good players that come out of drafts. And the unknown factor and the fact that so many teams are down on it means you might be able to move up more. And it also means more instability. It means more flattening of talent. And you might be able to find that diamond in the rough. And those opportunities, I think, are really good for teams that are in Denver's position. So maybe they just find a guy. Maybe they grab somebody off of the free agency pile or bring in somebody from Europe, as much as I'm not as confident in those players as some of our international friends on the show, in the show community are. Maybe they grab somebody. Like, there are these things that can be game changer, change the course of the season, huge developments for Denver. One thing that happened last year, I thought, was like, they didn't get any of those. Like, they got no good news last year other than like overall general health, because Peyton made a leap, but not the one. He wasn't a playoff rotation guy. Christian was fine. I really don't understand the idea that Christian had a good season. He was fine. Reggie had a great first 2 months of the season, then turned back into Reggie Jackson that we all kind of feared that he would be. Justin Holiday was great in the playoffs, and he was a really good vet for them, but he wasn't a key part of the rotation. Nobody popped. Nobody popped. There weren't like great developments. Jokic didn't have a better year than ever. Aaron Gordon didn't have a better year than ever. Jamal Murray didn't have a better year than ever. Michael Porter Jr. didn't have a better year than ever. Close. But that also, I think, means that there's probably some upside there. I think that's like pretty positive for what they're going to be able to do next year. There's a good possibility that Denver's going to be able to find somebody. And as fans, you get to have whoever that is, whether it's Hunter Tyson, somebody over. I was just watching Pickaxe and Roll. You should go check that out. Ryan did a really good show there. Somebody in the chat was like, Hunter Tyson's going to be the next MPJ. And I was like, whew, the spiciness on that take. But like, who knows? One thing, I've been doing this for 17 years now. And one thing I think I've learned is like, weird stuff does happen, man. Like, weird stuff just comes out of nowhere. Jokic is like the proof of that, where they're just like, there are these elements that completely change trajectories, and they do need to be able to kind of change those type of things. Alexis still in here very oddly, saying the Nuggets are inferior to the Celtics. Alexis, the Nuggets would have beaten the Celtics. Just heads up. And Celtics, honestly, the Celtics writers and fans have echoed those same sentiments to me of like, they love their team. And so they're like, it would have been really tough, which is code for like, yeah, I don't know if they would have beaten Denver. That's like the Boston side of it. Do you know what it takes for Boston not to feel like they're going to win? Like one notable media person in Boston media was literally like, thank God for the Celtics that the Nuggets lost. It was said to me today. So you can think whatever you want, but smarter minds disagree. I think the other unknown that needs to be kind of considered is coaching. Okay. Malone has admitted like, hey, I probably ran the starters into the ground. And I've talked about this with Adam, that I believe that Malone is a very self-reflective coach. He used to have sequences where he would, like his first couple of years, he would play the bench all the way to the end of the game, and they would gas out and lose because he wouldn't put the starters back in. And he admitted, he was like, I did that too much. And he didn't do it again the next year. And then he would have problems where he would play certain rotations that were just disastrous. And he wouldn't do it. And he would stick with guys and then learn, and he wouldn't do it. He gets better every single year. Like, Malone genuinely wants to be a great coach. Does that sound like obvious? Probably. I think the fans, it's like, well, yeah, who doesn't want to be a great coach? The answer, most former players, guys. Most former players are like, I've been doing this for 40 years of my life. I don't care. Like, I've been doing this forever. I know what it takes. They're so confident. And because they've been successful their entire lives at basketball. So they don't really do that kind of self-reflection. I've noticed that a lot of former players are the ones that are like, can't wait to get in the tee time on the golf course on the off day. Versus like Malone, you don't hear about that. You know what you hear about Malone? He sat in his office and he did film work. It's a difference. That's why I'm not crazy about hiring former players. Carlos says, Matt, do you think it'd be irresponsible to draft a point guard with first round pick and add another unknown to a pivotal position of need? Okay, that's a great question, Carlos. I think, honestly, if you move up, yes. I don't think you can identify a player of that caliber. I don't think you can find a rotation point guard at 28. It's too hard. I just don't think you can do that. I just don't believe that that's possible. And like, hey, like a lot of people think they found one in the second round last year with Jalen, which I don't necessarily agree with, but maybe I'm wrong. I think if you move up, then yes. That's why I've kind of talked about the value of moving up from that perspective. And look, a lot of that may not be doable because these are still valuable draft picks, and getting trades with teams is hard. I will just say that like I've heard so much noise over the last 2 weeks about who's willing to move picks that I'm just like, God, there's so much movement here, because every team is kind of like, I wouldn't mind not having a pick in this draft. Like if you tell most teams, like, I'd rather have like a guy I know can play in the NBA, they would take that. Right. And you can say that the Nuggets don't have that because maybe Zeke Naji's not that. You know, Zeke Naji and Reggie Jackson are those two NBA players. And I always categorize NBA players as they're going to be in the league in 3 years. Maybe not, but I think it's worth at least exploring. In the final segment, I want to talk about a new championship DNA and what that means for Denver and why I think it's so important. We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Nuggets. Today's show is brought to you by BetterHelp. Therapy is absolutely important, I think, for everybody. I just don't think there's anybody that won't benefit from therapy. We all carry around different stressors, big and small. We keep them bottled up, and it can start to affect us negatively. Playoffs especially are a time when I'm just carrying too much stress, and it starts to leak out into various ways that are toxic, whether it's my behavior on Twitter or other kind of ways. And I got to reel that in. And that's why I think therapy is really important. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Get it off your chest with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate you guys being with us. On a Tuesday, let's see. Adam will be with you tomorrow because I have to go do media stuff tomorrow. And then Swipeage will be with you Thursday and Friday. And then he's also going to do a Saturday show. So be on the lookout for that as well. And then Adam and I'll be back with World's Finest on Sunday. I want to talk about a new championship DNA. And what I mean by this is the Nuggets had a championship DNA last year. And it was, I only just mean that because they won a championship. It wasn't just the roster, but that's a big part of it in that I think this fan base too often is just like, well, it's just Jokic. I think that's really easy to say, but we've seen Aaron Gordon have huge games on the road. We've seen guys give contributions. Bruce Brown was huge in the playoffs last year. Like, you do need contributions. It does take a whole team. Like, one of the things I think was so cool about last year's championship is it was a real team win. And if Boston wins, it's going to be the same. It's going to be a real team that plays together, that plays like a team versus four guys standing around watching another guy dribble. And that wasn't what Denver was this year. They weren't four guys standing around watching a guy dribble, but they just didn't have as many contributions. And a lot of that's because of like the combination. It wasn't just what Bruce brought individually. It's his chemistry with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. It was Jeff Green and his relationship with Nikola and as a connector emotionally with a lot of these guys. And they were kind of missing some of that this year. On-court stuff, off-court stuff. All right. And I mentioned on Ryan's show in the comments about like Ryan's talking about like, well, obviously they didn't do enough last year. And I was like, well, they were up 20 in game 7. And that has to be considered through this prism that I do think if they win game 7, they win another title. So it's like, did they have championship DNA? Yes. That doesn't mean that they don't need to get a new one now. I think that they need to find a new kind of chemistry. They need to bring in guys that are going to change and develop and alter that chemistry. And I don't think that they need to get super aggressive with that. Like, I don't think a Patrick Beverley is the right kind of chemistry that's going to be able to deliver what they need. I don't think that they need that edge. I think Adam and I are in a little bit different places on this. I don't necessarily think that that's going to vibe. I don't think you want healthy tension in the locker room. I think that they're okay if they're just like have good emotional drivers. But I do think that they need a little bit of a rework, and it's got to start, I think, with the coaching staff. I think it's got to start simultaneously with the roster, but they do need like a reconfiguring. And this is one of the problems, I think, with the Project Dynasty concept. It's hard for young players to contribute to things for championship DNA because they don't even know who they are yet. They don't know who they are in the league. They don't know who they are as people, let alone who they're going to be in the NBA. So I think that's very difficult, which is why like they need some new changes. And I do think that's going to be necessary because I don't think KCP is going to be retained. I am on this show going to talk about how I don't think KCP is back next year. That doesn't mean that I know for a fact. The Nuggets may get to the end of it and just be like, you know what? It's better than not having him. That just may be the result. But I am operating currently under the assumption that they will not be able to offer, that they will choose not to match whatever offer he gets in free agency. Because in part, I want to real quick on this KCP point. It's not just that a new contract takes him into the second apron. It's the question of how far into the second apron does a KCP contract take them? Because if he gets a ton of money, every dollar that he gets over that second apron is money that they have to figure out ways to move if they decide they need to get out of the second apron, right? It's not just about over or under. It's about how much over you get, especially with the money that they're going to have to bring up later. So I think that Denver needs a new championship DNA. I think then they need a reinvigoration of their offensive scheme. I think they need a little bit of a reevaluation of their defensive scheme. I'll be honest with you. One of my big concerns about next year is Nikola Jokic. I'm not worried about Nikola Jokic not being one of the 3 best players in the league. I'm not worried about Nikola Jokic not putting up 25, 12, and 8, 9, 11. Like, he'll put up the numbers. He's still going to be amazing and elite. He's in his prime. I am worried about the defensive side, given that that's usually where guys start to save energy as they get older and they get more tired. And I think that we saw that a little bit in the playoffs, and I'm concerned that they're going to lean more into that. The fact that they've moved so far away from playing aggressively at the level to more and more drop coverage, that's what you do when you're trying to save your big guy. Like, you don't want to exhaust him. It's easier just to play that drop. And Nikola is still not good at drop defense. And so I worry about that from the defensive side. You say like, well, Matt, their defense was better than ever this year. That's true. That's absolutely true. But I have concerns about the sustainability of it going forward. So they need reinvigoration on the defensive end too. Maybe that's just like Christian Brown brings them the energy. That's possible. That's an unknown. Maybe him as a full-time starter with more time just means his impact is that much greater, right? But I think that they need a reinvigoration there. And I think that they need to be able to rebuild some of the elements. I think when something is this good as it was last year, you really just want to be like, this is what it is. And honestly, it worked. Like, I've thought a lot about how opening night was and talking to those guys with Aaron saying, it's like we just stopped playing 2 days ago. Like, we just picked up that chemistry right away. And how great that win versus the Lakers was on banner night. One of the best nights in Nuggets history. I've thought a lot about that and just like, okay, do you really like, can you get, but the question is just like, can you get back there? Once it's gone, can you get back there? And I don't think by the end of the season, their chemistry was the same. Hurricane says, sounds like you're saying they need a new head coach. Surprising. No, I think that they need scheme changes in the staff. I think that honestly, if Adelman got a head coaching job, it's not that I think losing Adelman would be good, because Adelman's proven to be a great coach and a really great assistant, like a phenomenal assistant. But I just kind of think you need some shakeup on the staff. And I think that they need new ideas. They just need like to not just be like, well, we're just going to do the same stuff that we always do. I think you got to evolve. The Spurs did this. The Spurs were not the same in 03 as they were in 99. They weren't the same in 05 as they were in 03. They weren't the same in 07 as they were in 05. And they were not anything close to 07 in 2014. Like they evolved over that time. Right. And they had some misses. The Spurs never repeated. Right. Didn't repeat in 03, 05, 07, or 14. Right. But I do think that there needs to be kind of like a reevaluation of a lot of things from the coaching staff. And I also think there needs to be a reevaluation from the players. Like you need something. Jamal's the easy one. Like, yes, would it help if Jamal came in and was just like, I'm pissed off. I've taken people talking crap about me all summer. I've had to deal with Nuggets fans basically turning on me and wanting me shipped out of town after I helped win a championship. And I'm going to take that personal, and I'm going to finally live up to my potential. Does that change things? 100%. Like 100%. If Jamal levels up, it's a huge difference. I think there's other ways to use Aaron Gordon. I think there's other ways to use MPJ. I think that there is ways to revamp the roster that gets them a more cohesive unit. A lot of this to me, honestly, is about, I think that they need to not depend on Nikola Jokic as much. They need to evolve as a team where Jokic doesn't need to be the safety blanket, because I don't think that is a long-term sustainable strategy. They need more redundancy in their roster. I've talked about that before, but the DNA stuff, I think, is mostly about what their identity is and what the culture is like in the locker room. And they had the perfect one, I think, in 2023. And I don't think it was the same this year. They still could have won a championship. That's what makes this tough. Is like, did they have championship DNA this year? I think so. Was it as strong? No. And so they should try and work on that. And that's not just roster and X's and O's. It's also chemistry. And so I think these things are really important. Matthew says, do you think Moch had a change of heart coming out of this postseason, and we'll see more opportunities for player development and less emphasis of winning every game possible? I think so, but I will say the same thing that I've said repeatedly, which is I think Malone was ready to do that in the second half of the season, and the players said no. That is my personal opinion based off of my interpretation of events, but I am telling you that is how I feel. That I think the players were like, no, man, we're not going to work on development. We're going for the 1 seed. We can just win this. We can win everything. And they got bit by it. I think Malone was ready to downshift, and the players were like, no. And then Malone was like, cool, I hate downshifting. Great. But I think he'll probably be more insistent next year of, I have to be cognizant of these minutes. So yeah, I think that there'll be changes. Another Matthew says, Murray put up 35 in game 7. I don't know why people are so upset at him. They should be more pointed towards MPJ. Sorry, no, man. Jamal had a horrible playoffs. He had a good first half. He had a horrible playoffs. He just did. It's okay. He was hurt. And I am more than okay if you're like, we should not blame players for being hurt and not blame their conditioning for them being hurt. I think that's fair. That's fair. But he was not the same guy that he needed to be. He just wasn't. Joshua brings up Malik Monk. Yeah, give that up for Malik Monk. But he is talking about more of like the Bruce's, the bring in the fire. That's a good way to put it. I do think that they need a fire starter off the bench, somebody who gets the energy going, because Peyton Watson was in season 1 because he was so exciting, and then last year he was just like part of the rotation. Matthew says, I think we'll see less player development this season, even more relying on vets. If that happens, they'll be Michael Malone's last season in Denver. I will tell you that. Period. Point dot. Like, no question. Progressive says Wolves were made for the Nuggets. If Spurs lost that latest game, it probably would be a different story. Real quick, if Denver wins and they get the 1, they beat the Pelicans. They beat the Mavs in short order. And then in the conference finals, it would have been Wolves, Suns in first round. Wolves win because that was what happened. And it would have been Thunder, Lakers. So it probably would have been Lakers, Wolves. I think Wolves win. If Thunder win, Thunder, Lakers, I think Thunder win. And I think Wolves beat Thunder. I'm sorry. I think you guys still face the Wolves. And I think you still lose. Maybe Jamal's healthier by that round. Do they get past the Mavericks without Jamal? With Jamal being so hurt? Maybe. I don't know. So I'm not convinced that like, oh, if they just, I think if they won the Spurs game is an easy excuse, and it's labeling that one game when I think Denver would have still had problems no matter what. That's going to do it for Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you guys being with us. We'll see you guys again tomorrow. Adam will be with you with a solo show, and then we'll have shows throughout the week. Hope you guys have a great week. We'll see you guys again next time on Locked On Nuggets.